think 11 months ago, we made the announcement that we're going to go to the Big 12, and you know, a lot of people wanted to get excited about it. I specifically remember that Friday we were about to do our walkthrough going to play Rutgers, and it came across the TV that we're going to the Big 12, and everybody was excited about it but me. And I was like, geez, we got to go play a game here, you know. And so we gathered the team together out there on our Friday walkthrough, and we said, you know, at one point we're going to start talking about the Big 12. This is not the time that we're going to talk about the Big 12. And we focused those guys, and we went up and we won a game at Rutgers, and then the season ended, and then everybody wanted to start talking about the Big 12. Well, from a university standpoint, from a athletic department standpoint, that took place, which was incredibly important. We tried to just focus about our football team and what we needed to do to get better. We had to recruit. We had an off season, which I think we did a fantastic job at all that stuff. Well, now Big 12 is upon us, and the biggest questions are, what are you going to do different? Well, you know, we're really not going to do a whole lot different. I think over the course of time, West Virginia, our football team, everybody will get more familiar with the Big 12, and the Big 12 will get familiar with West Virginia. But I think it's going to take games for that to happen. And this Saturday obviously marks the first game that's going to happen. And you know, we're excited about it. We're excited about it, the future of West Virginia football. But from a coaches and a players standpoint, what needs to exist is we need to get to know our opponent. We need to make it a regular week. We need to ignore a bunch of outside distractions. We need to get our kids ready to play Baylor. And we're not playing the Big 12. We're playing Baylor. And we need to do a good job because they're a quality football team. They've won 9 games in a row. I've personally competed against Baylor 9 times. I know a lot about them. Worked with Coach Browse for 3 years. Know a lot about them. But our team needs to get to know Baylor, what their schemes are, who their players are, and what we got to do to win the game on Saturday. And I think over the course of time, we will get more familiar with the Big 12. So with that, I'll take some questions.
What was the first thing you said to them about Big 12? I think you mentioned it last Saturday night. You mentioned it for the first time.
Yeah, just that. It's you know, our goal in the beginning of the season is, and I think this is the same goal as everybody that competes in college football, is our goal is to win the conference. If you win your conference, especially the Big 12 conference, if you win your conference, then you go to a BCS game and you have the potential of playing for a national championship. So this is step one in achieving that goal. So you know, it's conference time, and each and every game is going to be important, and this is the first one, and we need to do what we got to do to win the game. You know, and then today, here in about 2 hours, I stand right here in front of the team, and I'll tell them a bunch about Baylor. This is what Baylor is all about, and this is what we got to do to win the game.
Is it easier to be a new member coming in, or is it the advantage on the other side?
I don't think it makes any difference. You know, there's no secrets out there when it comes to what our game plans are going to be. You'll watch a whole bunch of film. We got as much film on Baylor as Baylor's got on us, which was the same amount of film that we had on Maryland. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much film you can watch. So we will, you know, do our best to prepare them and what we think that they're going to do and who they are. And then it's about getting them out there ready to play. I think from a comfort standpoint, you always would prefer to play at home. That's no secret. But you know, we'll hopefully use that to our advantage this week, and then obviously next week we're going to have to play on the road.
What is Baylor all about, and what do you have to do to win?
Well, you know, Art's been there for 5 years, and I hope 4 years from now I can say the same thing about West Virginia from a program standpoint. Of the program's established. He's made his mark on the program. He's got 30 guys that are in there too deep that are juniors and seniors. So the retention's been good. From a coaching staff standpoint, the retention's been good. That wasn't the easiest job that he took over 4 to 5 years ago. And he got to the point where they're going to bowl games, they're winning, they're ranked. They're being talked about on a national standpoint. They're building facilities that are fantastic. So you know, what he's done with that program over the last 5 years is impressive. And it's not a surprise because he did the same thing at Stephenville. He did the same. Stephenville High School is a prominent high school in Texas. Did the same thing at Houston. He's doing the same thing at Baylor.
Dan, you've coached in Big East a year, you've coached in Conference USA for a year, I guess. Is there a cultural difference between Big 12 football and other football, or is football football?
No, there's a cultural difference, and we're still adapting to it. Probably the biggest difference is the amount of kids that play. In those games compared to the Big East games, that you could go into a Big East game and just plan on playing about 40 kids, which happened last year. It's happened here for a long time. That's hard to do when you're taking that many snaps. I mean, Baylor's averaging, I think, 90 snaps a game, and defensively they're averaging defending 87, 88 snaps a game. Last week against Maryland, because of what Maryland's game plan was, we each got 67, 68 snaps. So based on what Baylor's going to do, they're going to go up tempo, they're going to play fast, they're going to take a lot of snaps. Well, then that means we'll probably take a lot more snaps on offense as well, which means you got to play more people. And I've been saying this for quite some time. That's the biggest difference in Big 12 and Big East. I think the culture's changing in the Big East a little bit, especially when they bring in teams like Houston and those guys, Boise State and stuff to the Big East. I think that culture's going to change too.
Is there a cultural difference too from the fact that there's so many schools in Texas, and they've had, a lot of them have had so much success compared to West Virginia, which is 2 major colleges and really small? And I mean, is there something there that works into it, in the equation?
I don't know. I mean, the skill's good. Baylor's got great skill, and I've made reference to this from a recruiting standpoint. I mean, those guys play football when they're in first grade, and they're playing a lot of football when they're in junior high. So when you get them, they're probably more game ready from a skill standpoint, not from a talent standpoint, but from a skill standpoint, they're probably a little bit more game ready.
Coach, you expect Sean to be 100% for Saturday?
He's day to day. He didn't practice much last week. Probably could have played a little bit more on Saturday, but didn't practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we just felt like it was in our best interest not to play him. It's a long season. If you're not healthy enough to practice during the week, then you're probably not going to play on Saturday. So that was our stance with it. He was an emergency guy, got in a few times. He will need to practice today, tomorrow, and Thursday at a high level for us to count on him playing on Saturday. Which I expect it to happen, yeah, I do.
When a team's playing with that kind of tempo, how do you manage making those personnel substitutions? It's different. Obviously, you have to think about it differently.
Well, the rule is if offense subs, defense matches. So if Baylor doesn't sub, then we better be careful about subbing because they're going to snap it. And I do the same thing offensively. If I don't sub and they feel like they need to sub, then we're probably going to go ahead and snap it. So you got to pay attention to their sideline. You got to find out what their personnel groups are, and you got to match it. And if they're changing personnel groups, I know one thing that happens is, and they're tricky about it. I've known this for a long time, but they're tricky about it. The ball will go off on their sidelines, so you got a big cluster of people on their sidelines, and then they sub. Well, it doesn't look like you subbed, and they're going to snap it, which that's against the rules. And we'll talk to the officials about that prior to the game. But bottom line, if they sub people, we got to sub people, and that allows you to match it to the point where you can get yourself lined up before they snap it.
Dana, schematically, because of your Texas Tech, roots together, are you similar, the same, identical? How are you guys comparatively?
Pretty different. Pretty different. You got to remember that was 2002 was the last year. I mean, that was 10 years ago. I have a hard time figuring out what I did 10 days ago. He's been at 2 different stops and has evolved. I've been at 3 different stops and has evolved. So we haven't sat down and talked football in 10 years, so I really don't know. But just from watching it on film, then there's obviously some differences. Which, if you go to, if you really studied it, there's quite a bit of differences in what I'm doing now, what I did at Texas Tech, let alone what we did in Texas Tech in 2002 or what he did at Houston in 2004. So.
I don't know how much you practice one-on-ones, but given the fact that your offense runs as quickly as it does,
good question. We always do 2 periods a day against each other anyway for speed of the game. If there's crossover, then we talk about that as a staff, and we try to help each other out by not just running plays or run plays for speed of the game, but to give them some looks that we feel like might be beneficial to them, where we're not wasting time.
Will you do more of that this week?
Now, we won't do more of it because, again, the offenses are different. There's some similarities which we can get accomplished in 2 periods, but we have pretty good scout teams that can give them the correct looks as opposed to a manufactured look just for speed of the game.
How difficult is it to get scout teams to duplicate that tempo?
Hard. It's hard. So we'll do our best.
And something else they do is a little different. Their receivers, they'll put like way wide outside between the number and the sideline. For an offense, what does that achieve, and what type of a wrinkle is that for a defense trying to handle that?
It just makes you cover the whole field, which we do a pretty good job of that offensively as well. Making guys cover sideline to sideline, but then stretch them vertically as well. And if you want to look at 2 similarities, I mean, we try to make them cover the field sideline to sideline. We don't line our receivers up out there, but the ball may end up out there quite a bit. And then if you're really focusing on stretching the field this way, then you need to stretch the field vertically as well. And they do a fantastic job of that. So we got to cover the field sideline to sideline because of their splits, and we got to make sure that they don't get behind us because they got good speed and they're going to run the ball. They're a very balanced attack. They're going to run the ball 50% of the time, and then they're going to take shots downfield. If you're successful 1 out of 3 times, that's pretty good.
You mentioned that you like Maryland's receivers. How do these guys stack up to the Maryland guys you faced last weekend?
They're faster. Those guys were shiftier. Those 2 kids are dynamic now. 1 and 82. Those guys can play anywhere. The 2 kids that Baylor's got are vertically probably better. Maryland did not have a vertical passing game. They sat there and they watched the clock go down to 1. They snapped it, and then they just tried to put it in the ball. And then those 2 kids 2 or 3 times just made a whole bunch of people miss. And so those 2 guys can play anywhere. We got to do a good job of tackling, a better job of tackling, but those 2 guys can play anywhere. Baylor's more of a run the ball, go it as far as you can.
Speaking of that, can you win this game if you tackle like you did in the first 3 games?
Hope so.
Oh, don't tackle like that, though, do you?
Well, yeah, you always want to get better, which we're gonna work hard on trying to get better defensively from a whole bunch of angles, and tackling is always one of the first ones. Just like we're gonna try to get better offensively at finishing blocks in the run game, and trying to put the ball in play a little bit more, and maybe go vertical a little bit more. There's always things you can do better.
How much, we obviously struggled with the run game last week. How much of that had to do with simply the absence of Sean Austin?
It affected you a little bit. I mean, we had 1 back. If we gave it to him 35 times, then we probably wouldn't have him this week. You got to be careful of wearing people out. So, and Maryland did a good job of taking the run away. I mean, the 20 times we handed the ball off, we didn't get very many yards. And we didn't have the ball very much either. So you're only looking at 65 snaps to deal with. You don't want to waste half of them just for the sake of handing it off to try to establish the run. I mean, we did a pretty good job in the pass game, I thought. So that's what scored the points. Which, if we're sitting here without 31 points, we probably wouldn't be very happy right now. So, Sean helps. But again, it's what they're giving us as well. I mean, they were blitzing a good bit. They were shooting gaps. They had 3 linebackers and 2 D linemen that can play anywhere. But those guys will be playing on Sundays. I give them a lot of credit. They played with a bunch of effort. Their scheme was good, and they played hard. They wanted to win.
Is Sean also better in pass blocking as a back? I mean,
That's
they got
good.
some heat on him, on Gino. Is there something Gino can do to...
The heat on Gino wasn't a result of the running backs. It was a couple of blown assignments up front, which has resulted Gino probably hanging onto the ball a little bit. They were mixing some stuff up, which I'm not going to say rattled anybody, but made it a little harder. And the speed of the game was different, so that's going to help us this week. I mean, the speed of which they did things at was a little different than what we faced in the 2 games. And it was good to see that, and it was good to see us be successful against that as well. You talk about completing 70% of your passes, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Pretty good day, isn't it? I know we're spoiled around here, but geez, that's still a pretty good day. Against a pretty quality defense. I sat here and told you these guys got 6 or 7 guys that are seniors that have played a whole lot of football that are pretty good. Are we going to face better? Probably. But was it good? Yeah. Did we do what we had to do to win? Yeah, and I was proud of it for that. Was it average for our standards? Maybe. We'll try to get better.
You mentioned the scout team earlier, and this week you gave the awards out to one Amos Zeraway's younger brother, who apparently snuck under the radar and coming in here. Can you tell us a little about him? And
I really can't. I don't know much about him.
Okay.
I just figured out who he was a week ago. I understand the last name, but he's got on the team from the walk-on tryouts and stuck him on scout team. Week 1, he did a good job. Gave him more responsibility. Week 2, he did a good job. Made him scout team player of the week. Week 3. So he's doing a good job of preparing our guys, and he has a good attitude and does well. That's about all I know about him right now.
You mentioned the cultural differences earlier, and Baylor, see what they've done from a turnover standpoint over the last 7 or 8 games, and they talk about how their defense has given up yards, but if anything, they've been opportunistic. Is over the course of a conference season, turnover margin one of the most important stats in that for your guys? I guess aside from practice, playing somebody that's as aggressive as they are turnover-wise?
Maryland did. I thought Maryland did a good job of creating turnovers. It was one of the things we talked about. We showed them all their forced fumbles and their interceptions, which, again, 0 turnovers is going to win you games, regardless of what's going on. Baylor's got that mentality. That mentality exists in the Big 12. It's all Mac Brown talked about yesterday was turnover ratio. It's all they're working on is turnover ratio. It's one reason Joe DeForest is our defensive coordinator is because they led the country in forcing turnovers last year. They gave up yards, they forced turnovers. We're going to give up yards, but we're going to force turnovers. Baylor's given up a bunch of yards, but they forced turnovers. It's ultimately what the score is at the end of the day.
The defensive differences were something people talked about yesterday too. The short memories and kind of getting over bad player series. That's defensively, but offensively, do you coach any differently when you anticipate it might be a shutout? Like maybe you're a little bit more aggressive, maybe you go for things earlier because you might need 41 points instead of 31 if the defense is going to be giving up scores.
Yeah, I'd like to say no, but it probably has to do. It probably has some effect. Much like this, we ran 7 plays in the first quarter, right? Mm-hmm. This last week, and it's not because defensively we were giving up a lot. We ran 5 plays and punted. Well, that happens. They got the ball first, 5 plays punted. They turnover, we scored, and then we held them. They punted 2 plays, we scored. All right, so we got 7 plays, and what they were doing in their 3 drives was they were again huddling and then getting on the ball and then waiting 30 seconds, and which that's how they do that. I don't know. That's hard to watch. But anyway, so I got impatient. And then they scored a couple of times. It was 14-14, but I got a little impatient. You run 7 plays in 1 quarter. I got impatient. So I don't know if I called the best game based on that. So the way the game goes probably affects the way you call the game. If you're down, what do people do? If you're down 14, 21 points, what happens? The offenses get antsy and they start pressing and they start trying to make things happen quickly. Don't say it's the right thing. I think it's human nature. So I think we got to probably guard on that.
Thoughts on Nick Florence?
Yeah, good player, program player. Been there for 4 years. Understands. Been there in that quarterback room for going on 5 years now. And Art does a great job of coaching quarterbacks. Art recruited Case Keenum when I took him over, and had Kevin Cobb, who's playing in the NFL, and obviously had RG3 there for a couple of years. He does a great job of developing quarterbacks. You talk about that kid who's a program player. Is he talented like some of the other guys out there? Not as talented, but is a winner. Runs the ball good. We're gonna have to make sure we contain him, and then understands the system, gets him in the right play, and does a good job of completing balls. Takes some chances, and hopefully he takes a few too many that we can capitalize on.
When you get in a game like this with two high-powered offenses, does that factor into trying? I know you can't really speak until you know the situation, but you obviously want a touchdown instead of a field goal. When you get into a fourth down and you may have to kick a field goal, how tough is that decision going to be to have to take the 3 points instead of push on and try to get the 7?
Well, you always take the points, but depending on how the game is.
Yeah.
If you're down a lot, then you probably should go for it. It just depends on how much you're down and how much time's left. I think that's all in-game feel for the game and decisions and all that. So,
the skill between leagues from Big East to Big 12, obviously much discussed. Defensive lines, though, not much of a difference.
It was last year.
Right.
It was last year. We faced more good quality D linemen last year. And granted, some of that was LSU Clemson. But you talk about draft pick at UConn, you talk about a draft pick here, you talk about a draft pick Syracuse, Cincinnati, a couple. Pretty good. I did not see a single difference from a D-line standpoint in the two leagues. From a skill standpoint, yeah, I think there's a difference. Everybody's going to have skill. Everybody's going to have guys that can run. Tavon Austin plays fast, is a great receiver, and is fast. There's guys out there that are just as fast as him. Baylor's got one.
Okay, thanks, Coach.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We'll see y'all.